With the Shadowcat, Pivot is saying that 27.5-inch wheels aren't dead for trail bikes. Stay tuned for a long-term review to check out how we got on with it. The Shadowcat is Pivot's take on an agile, fun, playful trail bike. It's got 140mm travel in the rear end, delivered with their signature DW Link suspension, and up front is a 160mm fork and a pair of 27.5-inch wheels. This is not a bike that is outdated, this is a bike that is a current year model that Pivot has decided to fit with a pair of 27.5-inch wheels just to increase that kind of playful nature and make for a really fun time, and so far it's been proven to be exactly that. The Shadowcat is constructed with their hollow core carbon technology. It lets them get that carbon fiber frame down to a really respectable weight, and I think the frame in a medium size comes in at about 5 pounds, which is pretty incredible for the kind of stiffness that they've managed to deliver with that frame and the abuse that has been taken so far without a problem. And complete bike weights come in, I think this Team XTR in a size medium is claimed to be 26.5 pounds for the standard build. And even with the tyre spec that we've added to this, it still comes in at a respectable 28 pounds, which is pretty incredible compared to some of the 30+ pounds bikes in the same category as this. And it makes for a real difference on the trails. It really adds to the agility and the ease of it, getting it up to speed, and yeah, makes for a really good fun time. Pivot are always good at covering the details with their frames, so you've got full internal cable routing, which instead of using the tube-in-tube technology that you get on most bikes, instead uses really clever clamped cable ports at the head tube and then the exits on the frames, which saves weight overall. It also prevents any structure being lost from the frame by adding those hollow core the kind of tubes on the inside to run the cables through, and it still delivers a really clean solution that doesn't give you any rattle with the cables. They've used a nice and clean, really good effective chainstay and seat stay protector on there to keep the noise down. You've got a full space in the front triangle for a big bottle cage, and yeah, all in all the details are all well covered, and it really kind of delivers a nice and premium feeling frame in the end. And of course there's the mounts on the underside of the top tube for Pivot's tool dock. You can also mount one below the bottom bracket too, so yeah, you can add their really nicely cleanly integrated tool system to kind of cover you on your rides and make sure you don't get left out there with a mechanical. Pivot offers the Shadowcat in sizes extra small through to large, so they opt not to run the extra large size for this 27.5-inch wheeled bike, just because they don't think the typical sort of super tall riders are likely to purchase this kind of bike, but that'll fit riders all the way from about 4'11" up to 6'2", so certainly still covers a nice and broad size range, and yeah, I think most riders are going to find a happy size for them on the Shadowcat. The geometry on this size large that we tested, it has a 480mm reach with a 623mm stack. Constant across the size range is a 65.8 degree head tube angle and a 76 degree seat tube angle. The bottom bracket height is 340mm off the ground, and that equates to about a 17mm bottom bracket drop. And then the rear end is 430mm, which totals to a 1230mm wheelbase. So as you may be kind of used to seeing with Pivot bikes, there's not really a budget-minded entry-level offering of the Shadowcat. It starts at a SLX kind of level build at $62.99 and then goes all the way up to $11,399 for the top spec with the new SRAM transmission drivetrain and Fox Live valve suspension on there. We tested the $9,899 Team XTR build, which, as you would expect for a price tag like that, does come with a really nice build kit that we've had absolutely no complaints about. The suspension package is a Fox factory level with a 36 Grip 2 fork, 160mm up front, and then a float DPS rear shock to keep it nice and light and give you the kind of compression adjustment abilities that you may want to deliver the best performance that you can. There's a Fox transfer factory dropper post to match those, and then, as the name might suggest, the XTR applies to the brakes and the drivetrain, so you've got their XTR 4-pot brakes and a 12-speed drivetrain on there, as well as a Raceface Next SL crankset. All in all, it's a seriously dialed build, especially with those Reynolds Pivot carbon wheels, which shave even more weight off of it, let it come in at that 26.5 pound weight. Yeah, certainly it's all dialed stuff, as you would expect to for that price tag. Now we've talked about the build specs you can get on it, let's talk about how it rides. But at the same time, it's beautifully agile and nimble, Just darting side to side across the trail is so easy, so fun, and it pedals super well too. It's been quite a while since I've tested anything this light, so Pivot have managed to really shave the weight down with the Shadowcat. Not only is the frame super lightweight, but also the build kit on this Team XTR is pretty damn light all around, and of course those 27.5-inch wheels do help to keep that overall weight down too. That is instantly noticeable on the trail. Even with the burlier tire spec that I put on this bike, you know, I was taking this on a bit of a road trip around the west coast of America, and I wanted to just have tires on there that I didn't have to worry about. You know, the Exo Plus tires that come on it, or maybe even Exo, don't quote me on that, are not the kind of tires that I can just ride blind terrain with total confidence in. I'm a pretty big and heavy guy, and yeah, often they pay the price and ruin an otherwise good ride. So I stuck on some burlier options just to give me peace of mind there, and they've proved to be, yeah, as you'd expect, kind of worry-free the whole time. And even with those burlier tires, adding, you know, 1.5 pounds to the weight overall, it's still a super light and snappy and agile bike. Getting off the mark is incredible, just how little torque you need to get the bike spinning up, to get those wheels moving, and it makes for a really enjoyable time, not only on, you know, off the mark, trying to sprint, trying to just go, and the feeling of less energy required to get moving, but also in technical climbs when it's not super chunky. Being able to accelerate so quickly means that you can clear stuff that otherwise you might just not quite have the speed to get up. Or certainly over a longer ride, the reduced energy that you have to output is noticeable. That said, the smaller wheels do end up hanging up in smaller holes considerably more than a 29er, so you've got to be on it, especially with that front wheel, making sure it doesn't dip into the holes and stop you and lose and rob your momentum. So as long as you're able to do that, it does, I think, lead to reduced energy expenditure over a technical climb in the long run, and it just makes for a really nice and fun time on the climbs, because you can really just pop and play with the bike on the way up to get it exactly where you want it on the trail. And yeah, it certainly goes up the hill really nice and well. The DW Link suspension, as you'd expect from a Pivot bike, is nice and efficient. It's not super stiff, it's not the absolute most locked out bike when you're pedaling it, but it blends a nice combination of agility and efficiency with still taking this edge off of the kind of micro chatter on the trail while you're pedaling, to keep it comfortable for longer days in the saddle and pedaling up looser, rougher terrain. They've definitely struck a really nice balance. I've been using this system for a while, and I think they've really got the kinematics nailed down for it. The climbing position, the 76-degree effective seat tube angle, especially with my long legs, I mean, you can see the amount of dropper that I've got out the frame there. The position that you end up on the bike is a slightly more rearward than many of the current kind of enduro super steep seat angle bikes I've been testing recently, and that is a little bit notable, especially when it gets really steep. You can end up with a little bit too little weight on the handlebars and ending up in a bit of a wheelie, but with your kind of butt parked on the nose of the saddle, it's manageable just about. This still isn't a bike that goes up the steepest of terrain without thinking about it. You do have to be mindful of keeping weight on that front wheel, but when you do that, it's certainly manageable, and the overall low weight again just makes it a real pleasure to get going again on the steeper climbs, and yeah, makes for a pleasant climber overall. But it's not the most forgiving bike to ride sometimes. Definitely got to be on it with your line choice. It's when you get to the descents that the 27.5-inch wheels have the most kind of varied positives and negatives in there, I'd say. Certainly if you're a rider who values being able to dart side to side in the trail, pop and play at any given moment, this bike is a serious amount of fun. It's incredibly agile, but that agility does come at the price of stability, especially when it gets high speed or really rough. This is slightly more of a handful than a 29-inch wheeled equivalent bike would be, and that is very notable, especially if you're riding trails that you don't know that well. It's not the kindest bike to ride when you're trying to push it really hard, That said, it's a trail bike, not an enduro bike that's designed to absolutely pin it on the most rough and rowdy descents. And if you take it at that kind of value, then this thing is a serious amount of fun. It's efficient, you can kind of pump the terrain to work for your speed. You can get up to speed really easily again because it does spin up so quickly, and getting side to side on the trail, darting, taking inside lines, maneuvering around really tight terrain is an absolute treat on this thing, and it's super fun. And yeah, certainly had me hooting and hollering at all kind of given moments on the trail, because it really is a super fun and playful bike. Don't get me wrong, it definitely still packs enough capability in there, especially with that 160 fork up front, to get you out of some pretty hairy situations and down some pretty rough and gnarly terrain. You just got to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more mindful not to stick those wheels into some of the bigger holes that you might have been used to now on a 29er, just rolling through without any problem. And also just to, yeah, keeping the bike a little bit more calm underneath you, just to offset that slight kind of nervousness that it can get, especially when the speeds increase and that agility starts to become a drawback. But for sure, overall, Pivot has done a really good job at kind of blending a healthy dose of capability, an incredible amount of stiffness and kind of reassuring feeling in that bike for how low the weight is, and just overall fun factor. This thing is a serious amount of fun. And I think for a rider who's not concerned about setting PRs on the fastest and roughest terrain, this bike is a serious amount of fun, and it should actually absolutely be one that you consider if you're just looking to have a really nice and fun time on the trails without really caring about the clock. Unless it gets really tight and technical, in which case you might just be faster on this thing. Yeah, kudos to Pivot for also putting together one of the most dialed builds that I've been on. There's very few things that I would even consider changing on this, apart from maybe that tire spec, just depending on the terrain that you'll be riding. It's a really dialed package. Of course, you'd expect so for almost $10,000, but yeah, certainly it's a bike you're going to be able to take off the shelf, go and shred, and have a great time on. Thank you very much for tuning into this video, guys, and let us know in the comments what you think of this. Is a 27.5-inch wheeled bike in your future? Are you considering it again just for that fun factor that maybe the 29-inch wheeled bikes have lost slightly? Let us know, and yeah, we'd definitely be interested to hear from you. Give us a like if you've enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel to see more awesome content on awesome bikes like this. Thank you very much for tuning in. Catch you out on the trails. Wow, getting a bit loose there, but it's a serious amount of fun. Whew.